Hi, I'm Ashli Montgomery with Quilt to End ALZ, and welcome to the fleeting block of the month. We are working on month 5, so this is our May layout. We are back to a 12.5 by 12.5 inch block this month, and this one is so adorable. It's perfect that I'm filming this in April. It's raining and cold outside, but we're getting ready for Mayflowers, and this block to me has this beautiful flower pinwheel summery feel to it. So let's get started. First thing on your instructions are our cutting pieces. So out of fabric A, which for us is our light pink, we need 4 8.5 by 1.5 inch rectangles. We don't use fabric B at all. In our sample quilt, that's the rust. And fabric C, we just need 6 3 inch squares. Sorry about that. We need 6 3 by 3 inch squares. We're going to mark each one on the diagonal to make half square triangles. In fabric D, that is our cream color, we need 2 8.5 by 1.5 inch rectangles. We need 6 8.5 by 1 inch rectangles, and we need 1 4 by 4 center square. And then fabric E, that's our dark teal in our sample. We're going to do 2 8.5 by 1 inch rectangles, 6 3 by 3 squares, that's going to go with our mint here to make our half square triangles. And then we also need 4 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. So once you get those cut, you can set them aside, and this block comes together very nicely. We're ready for the first step, and that's to make our half square triangles. We're using fabric C, which again for us is our mint green, and fabric E, which is our dark teal. We've made a mark on the diagonal of our lighter fabric. We're going to put these two together, right sides facing, and we're going to stitch on either side of our pencil line. Now the beauty of this is that we can chain piece this. So we're going to put one of them in there, and we're going to just keep putting one after another. I'm going to stitch all the way down this first one, and then we'll do another one. And I love chain stitching. I think that it's really good for our machines. I've always been told that it's nice to keep tension on your machine. And if you're working on a project that isn't really conducive to chain stitching, I like to have some scraps or a second project going at the same time. If I'm honest, I have about 20 projects going at one time, but I try to keep that next to the machine, and that way I have something that I can sew in between pieces to keep that tension nice and solid on the machine. So we're going to fly through this, and I will meet you at the pressing table. Perfect. We have 6 of these little guys, so we've got the 2 stitches on either side of the pencil line. I'm going to put a little bit of heat on there that sets the thread, sets the stitches in place. Then we're going to cut right on that pencil line. Let me move my glasses so you might be able to see better on the little side cam here. All right, now we've got 2 half square triangles. I'm going to open them up, pressing towards the darker fabric. Put a little bit of heat on there just to get that nice and flat. And then we're trimming these to 2.5 inch squares. There's not a lot to trim, and I've even heard some people say, oh, when I'm within 1/16 of an inch, I let it kind of work itself out. I'm still a new enough quilter that makes me nervous, so I did take the time to go ahead and line these up on my little ruler and make sure that I did trim that little tiny piece. You're not going to get much, but this is probably the only time-consuming part of this block, but I think it's really worth it to have a perfectly square half square triangle. Now, trying to be like a good cooking show, I went ahead and did a set of these ahead of time so that you're not watching me go through those steps. So here are my finished half square triangles. The next step of our instructions, let's see here, is to assemble these with our solid fabric E 2.5 inch squares, and these are going to make the side units that are going to go around our center square. So let's put these on. we're going to do, it's going to look just like your little, your diagram there, but it's going to be just like this, where our fabric E is matching up to our fabric E. And I'm going to need to make 4 of these, so I'm going to chain piece those, and I'll meet you back. Here they are. I've got all 4 of my side units put together. I'm going to just snip those threads where I was doing my chain piecing. I'm going to put a little heat on each one, set those stitches, and then I'm going to press them open, and I'm going to press, I like to press where there's the least amount of bulk, makes most sense. So I'm actually going to press back towards that solid square, that little 2.5 fabric E square. Now while I'm stitching these, I want to tell you about an event that we have coming up. If you didn't see it in last week's email, or maybe you haven't been on the website in a while, but we are hosting our first in-person quilting retreat, and this is going to be June 8th through 12th. It's in Hillsboro, Texas, which is just outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. The venue is called the Red Boot Retreat Center. It is a really nice quilting retreat center. The owner, Carrie Lewis, is a phenomenal hostess. She's a great quilter, and she and I met when I did one of our Quilt to End ALZ Guild presentations, and she shared her Alzheimer's story with me. We had a wonderful meal together and really got to talk about how we could work together to build this community and build our strength, and share our Alzheimer's journeys, as well as educate people about the disease while we're quilting together. And so we're really excited to go to Hillsboro to be at the Red Boot Retreat Center in June 8th through 12th, and we would love for you to come with us. So if you haven't seen it, go to quilttoendalz.org, read through, give me a shout if you have any questions about it, but we would love for you to join us there. All right, we've got our side units pressed and put together. We are going to take 2 more of our half square triangles, and I'm going to actually go over here to the overhead camera, and let me move our fabric pieces out of the way. And I just want to lay this out for you. It's not confusing. I'm a real picture person, and so I sit here and stare at the diagrams. Clara, my niece, as you guys know, is our graphic designer, and she does all of the computer work to put these patterns together, and they're so beautiful and they're so easy to follow, and for me that's because of the diagrams. So we're going to make 2 of these top and bottom rows. So we're going to take our half square triangles, and we're going to make our mint, make a little V, and then we're going to put our teal where we've got this little it's going to end up, in my mind, it ends up looking like a flower petal, but we've got this color blocking going on, and I just wanted to lay that out to show you. So we're going to stitch here and here and here and here, and these are going to be the top and bottom rows of our center unit. I try and give a lot of instructions about where to press, and as a beginner quilter, I feel like that's really helpful, because sometimes you don't envision where the quilt is going, and so you're not exactly sure how should I do this to create the neatest and the flattest block, and so you don't get a lot of bulkiness, you don't get a lot of creases when you go to quilt it, and I just think it makes for a nicer finish. But sometimes you just can't help it, and whenever that happens, I like to press my seams open. So that is something I'm going to do on this step. I didn't even tell Clara that when I wrote the instructions. I just told her that it was something that I just told her to set it out there. But to me, I think that it is helpful. And see, I got to talking, and now I have to look at my diagram again, because I don't want to make a mistake. All right, I see it. Very good. I told you guys, I am a visual learner. I am continually going back to the diagrams, and I will tell you this is the 3rd time that I've made this block, as we've tested it and prepared for the block of the month, and still I take time to go back and look at those diagrams. All right, one more little stitch. I don't know about y'all, but my little workspace here gets cluttered, which is probably not ideal when you're teaching a tutorial video, but there you go. It's real life. Okay, so we have these done. The next thing that we're going to do is take our center square. This is our 4.5 inch fabric fabric D. See, I have to watch myself. This is your fabric D, 4.5 inch center, and we are going to take our other 2 half square triangle side pieces that we created, and we're going to put them on either side. I'm going to consult my diagram so I don't make any mistakes. And why is that not lining up? I'm wondering if I didn't cut my square to the right size. Oh dear, I cut a 4 inch. So let's pause, and I'm gonna come back with a 4.5 inch. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully when that got edited, you got to fast forward through my mistake. I had grabbed the wrong size of square of my fabric D, and so this is a 4.5 inch. It's our center piece, and we're going to sew these our little half square triangle pieces on the sides. All right, I was just sitting there thinking as I was stitching that, isn't it nice that the quilt keeps us honest? It didn't let me make a mistake, because when I picked up that square that was the wrong size and I tried to line it up, I knew something was wrong. So it keeps us from making mistakes. Let's go ahead and put a little bit of heat on our center pieces, and then we're going to press those towards the centerpiece. So that is our fabric D square. I normally don't like to press towards the lighter fabric like that, but it's a lot less bulk, and you're not really going to see that. It's a very nice quality fabric. You're not going to see that that little piece behind there. And I had been chain stitching, so I'm going to go back and press my top and my bottom rows. Again, I always put a little bit of heat on the stitch as it was sewn, and then I bring it open, and I'm going to press these outwards. That way when I put the top and the bottom row on this center piece, then my seams are going to sandwich just perfect. So we're going to go outside, and then we're going to do the same thing going outside here. If you didn't get the newsletter last week, so we send out a monthly newsletter on April 7th, or on the 7th of every month. So this month it was on April 7th, and one of the things that we had in there was some information about the new facts and figures. These were just released by the Alzheimer's Association at the end of last month, and every year we get a new set. It's an update of statistics. They're both horrible and hopeful. That's what I always say. And then we also get an update on a special population, on a special thing that's going on, and of course an update on where we're at as far as treatment and cure advancements and options. And you can go to ALZ.org, and you can even just Google ALZ Facts and Figures 2022. But I did want to make sure that I pointed that out. It's really important information. It's eye-opening information, but it's worth going through. And even just, they have all the infographics. So you could just go through and read through those infographics without having to read the detailed PDF report. I think it may be like 70 or 75 pages, but the information is in the infographics also. But it's good to see, and so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, as well as the retreat that's coming up. Okay, I have pressed and pressed and pressed because I got sidetracked talking. I am a talker. Every report card I ever had said Ashli needs to talk less in school. So now we're going to go through and we're going to put our block together. I will show you what this is going to look like with our little overhead cam. And so we're going to put the top on just like that. and then we're going to put the bottom on just like, let me make sure I'm doing it the right direction. Yeah, just like that. So we've created this beautiful little, to me it looks like the little pinwheel that, you know, the kids stick in the yard and the wind spins it around. I just think it's a beautiful summery, it reminds me of the petals of a flower, but just a beautiful summery block. So we're going to go through and we're going to stitch these, and you're going to notice that the way we did that pressing, our seams are going to sandwich just right. We're going to do the top, we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. All right, let's take a second before we sew this and talk about pinning. I try and talk about it a little bit every single month because for me, it makes a big difference. I know some of you are way more experienced quilters than I am and just zip out these gorgeous, gorgeous pieces. But I worry that if I don't pin, my points are gonna get lost. So I put a pin at each of these little spots where, you know, I call them where the crosshairs come together. And I'm going to start by putting a pin directly in the point of these two half square triangles, and then I'm going to match it up about a quarter of an inch down where it's going to sandwich with this other piece. And then I'm going to just kind of do my fingers and sandwich that together, make sure everything's nice and flat, and then I'll push that pin down. And I'm going to do that same thing on this other side. There's no reason for me to do the center because I don't have crosshairs. I don't have two seams that are coming together. But sometimes in our blocks, I may end up with 6 or 8 or 10 or even 12 little pins. And I do this when I'm piecing my toppers. And I have found that it is really, really helpful to keep everything squared up and to keep the quilt coming together nicely. All right, so I've done the same thing over here. I'm going to lay that pin down and take it to the machine. Okay, one side is done, and even though I pinned, I had one that didn't come out just quite as perfect as I'd like, but I think it's going to be okay, especially if you consider we're going to put it all together, we're going to quilt it, I'm going to wash it, I'm going to dry it. So I know we like to be perfectionists, but I also know that this is fabric. It gives, it takes both, and so, you know, it's okay if we have a little bit that's going to get lost in the shuffle there. All right, so last one, I'm going to pin it just like I did the other one, and then I'll meet you back here. All done and ready to put some heat on those seams. And then we are going to press them, and we're going to press back towards that center block again. So I like to lay it on its face and then just very gently push those seams over to the side. And I barely set the heat on there just to kind of start training it to go that direction, and then I will turn the block over and I'll press on the top in just a minute, and that'll give me a nice smooth press. All right. Sometimes, especially if I'm using old vintage fabrics that have been passed down or something, I will use a little bit of best press right here. But these fabrics, this is Art Gallery fabric. We use a lot of their fabrics in our kits that we sell with our patterns online because they are so beautiful and the quality of them is just unbelievable. I love the feel of the Art Gallery fabrics every time that I use them in a quilt. And honestly, before I was paying attention to wholesale accounts and which fabric manufacturers we really wanted to represent, I had Art Gallery fabrics in my stash and I didn't even realize that I did. And then I will see an Art Gallery fabric and I'm like, oh, I used that in that quilt. No wonder I like that so much. Okay, our center unit is finished. Our center square, I think, is what I called it in the instructions. So now we're going to create these 4 frames that are going to go around this. The top and the bottom frame have the same pieces and the 2 side frames have the same pieces. So we're going to start with the top and the bottom. We're going to use our fabric A skinny rectangle. We're going to use one of our fabric D skinny rectangles, and we're going to use one of our fabric D fatter rectangles. So we've got a 1.5 inch, a 1 inch, and another 1 inch. Together we're going to end up at 2.5 inches, and we're going to put a half square triangle on either side. So I'm going to start first by just putting my 1.5 fabric D with a 1 inch fabric A. And I'm going to do 2 at the same time because I know that I need a top and a bottom. All right, so I've got the 1.5 inch D with the 1 inch A. Now I'm going to go through and put a 1 inch D on the outside. So I have the fat rectangle and 2 skinny rectangles. And while I do that, I wanted to ask you if you've been to our Facebook group. It's called Quilting to Mend the Mind. And a lot of you have been posting your finished fleeting blocks each month. And I'm just so impressed. They are absolutely fabulous. It's amazing to me how the different color combinations give the same block design totally different looks. And I've just really thought that it's been so fun to see that. We would love for you to share all of your quilt projects, not just our fleeting. We really want that to be a community of quilters coming together, sharing their projects, supporting one another in your quilting and in your day-to-day life. And especially those of us that have gone through Alzheimer's struggles with family or gone through a diagnosis, we want you to know that we're there to share those too. I think a lot of times just knowing that you're not alone is the most important message that we can give. So if you haven't been on the Facebook group, again, it's called Quilting to Mend the Mind. We would love for you to come and hang out with us. I actually, between our Quilt to End ALZ stuff and my quilt fiction that I write, I have not been on social media as much as I enjoy being, and so I can't wait to get on there. I'm going to get on there this weekend as I'm doing some traveling and have some time to sit, and I can't wait to see all of your April blocks. They've just been beautiful, and I really liked that April design. I have to tell you, every single month I think I say, ooh, I love this one. It comes together so nicely. So that's a sign of a fun pattern. Clara did a good job on it. All right, I have both of these put together. You know what's next. Press, press, press. So I'm just going to put a little bit of heat on there and then slide that over and do the same thing. And then on this one, so this is the top and bottom, and we're going to press the seams so I'm going to start and I'm going to press towards C on both of these. I just think it lays out nice. They're kind of skinny strips. On this, honestly, it's not going to be up against anything, so you can press this however feels most natural for your fabrics. Depending on the fabrics you've chosen, there may be one that folds a little easier than the other. So really and truly, just on this piece, you do whatever feels best for your fabrics. Okay. Let's do the other one. And then after I press this, we're going to go and we're going to put our half square triangles on either end. I'm going to go back to the diagram because that's how I make sure that I've got my half square triangle turned the right direction. So I both love and hate half square triangles. I love using them in a quilt, but I hate trimming them. And I feel like that's the most tedious part of a lot of quilt patterns. And then I end up loving the little pile of trim, and I feel so accomplished when I get them done. So I don't mind working with half square triangles. Let's see, I didn't get that pressed as well as I wanted. I'm gonna give that a little more attention here. Skinny strips are fun, but you do have to make sure they don't get folded anywhere on you. Okay, great. So we should have 4 half square triangles left. We're going to put one on either end of both of these top and bottom pieces. And so if you are looking at it on the diagram, you're going to put the fat or the thick rectangle on top, and then our fabric C part of the half square triangle is what's going to touch those strips. All right, let's go do it. All right, I am just putting a little heat on these seams, and now I'm gonna press towards the skinny strips, so away from the half square triangles, if that makes sense. We're gonna press towards these strips. And again, that's so that when we put it with put all 4 frames on, then our seams are gonna sandwich nicely. All right, the last step is to make our side frames, and they're super easy. We're gonna use our last 4 fabric D strips, our last 2 fabric A's, and our last 2 fabric E's. We're gonna lay them out exactly how the instructions show, where we've got a white or a fabric D, and then for us is pink, which is your fabric A, and then another fabric D, and then your fabric E, and your fabric E is what's going to end up being on the outside, so it's going to go, it's going to help frame the outside of the block. All right, before we get started sewing that, I'm just going to lay that out. Super easy to follow. Got these nice little skinny 1-inch rectangles, and I'm going to do D, A, D, E. Let's do it. I'm halfway between being finished here. I went ahead and put 2 strips together, so I've got my A and D, and then I did my D and E, and now I'm going to go ahead and press those before I put them together. I just think it's easier to feed it through the machine that way. It's a perfect spring day here because, as I mentioned a minute ago, it was raining and storming when I started, and now the sun is coming through the windows and the birds are chirping outside in the tree. So that's kind of our normal April weather. I'm here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know we have quilters not just across the country, but actually across the world. We've got several people that are sewing with us in Canada, and we've even got some people sewing from the UK, and so we welcome you wherever you are. That's another thing you could post in the Facebook group. I know we welcome everyone when they first get there, but you know, over time we kind of forget where everyone's from, so that would be fun if we go in and kind of reclaim our location and see where everyone's at. All right, gonna put these 2 together now. They're gonna look just like this, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the other ones, and then we'll be ready to put this block together. Okay, whew, everything is pressed and ready to be pieced together. I did have someone message me in our Facebook group and ask me what kind of iron I like to use, and do I put any water in it for steam? And the answer to that is no, I don't. Like I said earlier, if I need a little bit of moisture on some fabric, I use a little best press, and I try not to overdo it, especially on light fabrics, because they kind of get a little dingy if you do too much on them. But I use a very old school Black & Decker. It's very heavy, which I like because it helps to really push that fabric down, and it doesn't have any bells or whistles, but I've had it for years and years and years, and I love it. I actually have 2 of them. I keep one in here in the long arm room, which is also known as my son's bedroom, but he left for college 5 years ago, and I kind of started taking it over. And then I also have one in my cutting space, which is actually our guest bedroom, is where I sew, and I have created a little cutting board in the bathroom counter in there. So you know, we sew wherever we can and create our spaces where we need to, but that was the answer to that question, what kind of iron I like, and I've liked that one for a long time. We are ready to assemble the block. It's our final step. Let's go over here and place it underneath the overhead camera just so you can see how it's all going to fit together. We have our centerpiece. We're going to put our top and bottom, and when you look at the diagram, I tried to do that backwards. When you look at the diagram, the skinny rectangle, there we go, the skinny rectangle goes up at the top, or goes on the outside, and then same thing, the skinny rectangle is going to go on the bottom. That's going to put our darker, or our fabric E points out on our half square triangles. And then we're also going to have our fabric E rectangle is on the outside when we put our side strips on. So that's what it's going to look like. And I'm going to do my side strips first, because we have our end pieces are already on our top and bottom. And we're done. Here is our May block. Again, I just think it is an adorable little prelude to summer. We've got little pinwheels, we've got flowers that are headed our way, beautiful sunny days. I hope you have a fabulous day. Have fun with this block. Make sure you jump onto our Facebook page to share the block. Make sure you go to quiltandalz.org, take a look at the retreat and see if it's something you're interested in doing with us. And be sure and go take a look at the new facts and figures. Have a great month. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.